So now let's set up our Blender Precision startup file. Now you might be wondering why I'm saying Blender Precision. That's because Blender natively works in meters, and let me show you how I know that. Click this little arrow right here. This opens up your N panel. I also like to call it the N menu, and it's called the N menu because if you press N, it opens up the N panel. Now here is going to show you the dimensions if you have this selected, and the dimensions are 2 meters. That's a little bit big for us working with 3D printers and laser cutters, unless you have some very ambitious projects. But let's set this up into millimeters. So to do that, we're going to go here to our scene properties, and here you'll find units, and here you'll find length as well. Click into the length, change that to millimeters, and take a look what happens. We've just changed our dimension into millimeters, which means we haven't changed our space into the millimeter space. If we were working in the millimeter space, that 2 meters would have been 2 millimeters. That's because natively Blender works in meters, and we're trying to tell Blender, hey, we're wanting to work at 1,000th the size of your units, and that's what the unit scale is all about. It's super important to change the unit scale because the unit scale drives a whole bunch of things behind the scenes for Blender. So to change that, we're going to click in here, go 0.001 and hit enter. The grid disappears and oh no, what's going on? Don't worry, we're going to cover that in just a moment. But for those of you that want to work in the imperial system, change this to imperial, change that to inches, and you change this to 0.0254. Now a little caveat though, I haven't found any way of exporting in the imperial system because the export formats like STL and OBJ do not really have sizes in them. So whatever slicer or program that you're using to view it will usually see it in millimeters. So just be aware of that. I personally always work in the millimeter space, but now we definitely know that we're in the millimeter space because look at the dimensions. They're all 2 millimeters. Perfect. Let's bring that grid back. To bring that back, that is over here. This is the overlays drop down, and it has its own unit scale here. So I'm going to change this by clicking in it, going 0.001, hit enter. Brilliant. Now there is one other thing that we need to change now that we've changed the scale so much, which is our viewport rendering. Now what exactly is the viewport and why do we need to render that? Well, this space here, that is the 3D viewport, the 3D space that we're viewing things in. And this might be a new concept to you, but in the 3D space, we don't want to render all of it all the time because it's infinite. So we have a viewport plane, the clipping plane, there where we see things in. And that's what the clip start is, and that's what the clip end is. Now with a clip start so low, you can get some things going a little bit buggy. So I changed this to 0.1, and then I changed my end by 2 zeros because it was only set to a meter. So if I moved back a meter away, I would have seen nothing in my 3D view anymore. And usually when you're not seeing things in your 3D viewport, it's usually got to do with your clipping plane. Okay, now we need to save all of these changes because if you tried to restart Blender right this minute, everything, you'll have to do it all again because we haven't saved our startup file. But considering this is going to be the file that we're going to start up with every single time, let's change a few other things that I don't want to deal with every single time. First, my cube is a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to click this right here. These are some shading options, and I like to turn on cavity. Take a look at my cube. When I turn this on, it's just so much easier to see. So I'm going to change the type as well over to both, and then it pops even more so. Now, I know I have a camera and a light in my scene, and how do I know that? Look above my head, it says camera and light. I can click on them, and this area where my video is right this minute, this is called the outliner because it outlines what's in your 3D scene. Now, I don't want a camera and light every single time I start a precision project in Blender, so I'm going to select my light by left-clicking in the 3D viewport, and to delete it, you can click the delete key, but inside of Blender, delete key is always X. Sometimes delete key is just the delete key, but X brings up the delete menu because there's many ways of deleting things in Blender, especially when we go to editing the mesh itself. So I'm going to click here and click delete. Then I'm going to click this here, press X and click delete. So now I've just told you 2 shortcuts, the N menu, which is N, and delete, which is X. And don't worry, there's an entire crash course shortcut sheet straight underneath this video here. So let's save this now that we know that this is definitely how I want it to be. But how I really want it to be is I'm going to select my cube, I'm going to go into the item menu here, and this here is exactly how I want my file to be every single time I start up Blender. To save this, go over to File, defaults, and here you'll find save startup file. Now don't move your mouse once you've clicked it, because it comes up with another option to tell you, hey, you sure you want to save this startup file? And then click that once again, and now we have definitely saved our startup file. Just to quickly show you that it's 100% saved, I'm going to go to the dimensions here. I'm going to click and drag to select all of those boxes. I'm going to put in 200, and now this cube is gigantic. So to bring up your startup file, which is also known as your general file, I'm going to go File, New, General. And I'm going to say don't save anything. And here we have it. We have that 2mm cube. I do not have a light. I do not have a camera. If I go to my view, I can see my clip start and clip end is right. And I can see that my unit scale is right as well.